Hi guys, how you all doing? Welcome back to Karen Vibes. Well, you're not seeing my face today, so my face is out of it today. So welcome back. Alright, so we're gonna be continue reading our book. Name of our book is Minty Alley, written by C.L.R. James and narrated by me, Karen Ware. Alright, so if you're new to my channel, you can go to YouTube and look up Karen Vibes. So that's KAREN VIBES with an exclamation sign, Karen Vibes, and you can follow my reading there, so you can catch up. All right, so those who have been following my page, we are just gonna get right into it. So I hope you're all doing well, having an awesome Sunday evening, which is a holiday. Well, technically the holiday falls on a Sunday, so it will be celebrated tomorrow, which is Monday. Right, so anyway, so we get right into our reading, guys. So grab your cool drink or your cup of tea and we'll get right into it. And if you're having tea, you probably can try one of Kay's spicy teas, whether it's the lemongrass, the pimento, the soursop, or the bay leaf. And you can also use it to make iced tea as well. Alright, so we'll get right into it. So we're at chapter 1. No, what am I saying? Forgive me, guys. We're at chapter 21. So we had read chapter 20 and we're finished that. And we're at chapter 21. So let's go into it without further ado. Christmas came and was not nearly as gloomy as had been anticipated. A fortnight before, Mrs. Rose went to Gomes and made a desperate personal appeal to be allowed to draw all her money for at least 10 days. She succeeded. Then there were some private orders for cakes, and altogether life looked brighter. Early one morning of Christmas week, Archer came in. He had been serving His Majesty for another short period. He was warmly welcomed and came to tell Haynes good morning. No doubt sent by Mrs. Rose, for in his case, such an act of politeness, unprompted by authority, was impossible. He greeted Haynes gravely, as innocent looking and as quiet as ever. He came into the yard at about 9 o'clock, and 10 minutes after he was attending to the stove. This unexpected assistance gave Mrs. Rose more freedom and also relieved Miss Atwell, for after it was Christmas week. Though the nurse was not there, yet there was scrubbing of floors, cleaning of the furniture, etc. to be done. Miss Atwell, who had been helping in the kitchen, was switched off to cleaning as soon as Archer came. Work. Everybody was harder at work than ever before. But there was a cheerfulness and happy anticipation about number 2, which was in strong contrast to the hard, tense atmosphere in which the everyday work had been done during the past few months. After tea, Miss Atwell came fussing to Haynes about the condition of his room. But Haynes begged for a respite. I am going to the country tomorrow for 3 days, for Christmas Day and Boxing Day, Mr. Haynes. Yes, Miss Atwell, I have a holiday and I shall spend the time getting a little ozone. Of course, Mr. Haynes. Her agreement was apologetic. But anyway, you were saying? When I go, you can take charge. I know you'll be busy on Christmas Eve. The room is small though, and it wouldn't take you half an hour. But for the time being, give me a chance. Of course, Mr. Haynes, of course. That is a very excellent arrangement. She looked crestfallen, and Haynes surmised that they had counted on having him with them over Christmas. Nor did he want to go away, but he was somewhat tired, and for his health's sake, thought it would be good to go to a quiet country village by the sea. He wasn't particularly anxious to go, but he had made all arrangements already. In the evening, Miss Atwell laid his table and gave him his supper herself. He couldn't see Phyllis. She was so busy up and down, and Maisie, having put her mind to work, was working very hard. When supper was over and she was taking away the things, Miss Atwell remarked to Haynes how much she regretted that he was going. Mrs. Rose and she had planned to invite him to lunch with them on Christmas Day, as Mrs. Rose's guest in her part of the house. You is one of the family, you know, Mr. Haynes, and Mrs. Rose is very, very sorry. When she went, Haynes thought it over for a few minutes and then called Miss Atwell. Yes, Mr. Haynes? Her eager face was at the door. I am sorry to call you so often, Miss Atwell, Haynes began in quiet, unconscious imitation of her usual manner to him. That's quite all right, Mr. Haynes. Quite all right, she answered in her high-pitched voice, still looking expectantly up at him. I have to be in town on Boxing night. I can come down on Boxing morning, spend the day here, and at least take lunch and go out in the evening. Ask Mrs. Rose if that will do. That's too excellent, Mr. Haynes. That will do most perfectly. It is very nice of you, Mr. Haynes. We appreciate it very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Haynes. Later in the day, Mrs. Rose saw Haynes. We are very glad you have accepted our invitation, Mr. Haynes, she said, smiling almost shyly, like some poor young woman thanking a rich lover for some splendid gift. Just give me a second, folks. Let me just pause a bit. Alright, sorry about that, guys. I'm back. I had to go close the door. Alright, where were we? Alright, so she said, Mr. Haynes, she said, smiling almost shyly, like some poor young woman thanking a rich lover for some splendid gift. The Boxing Day lunch was quiet but successful affair. Four of them sat to the table. Mrs. Rose, Miss Atwell, Maisie, and Haynes. Everybody officially dressed. Phyllis served, but joined freely in the conversation. She helped things to go with a swing at the start. For Maisie, so glib in Haynes' room, was silent, and Mrs. Rose's thoughts were elsewhere. Though, for once, never a word about Ben crossed her lips. Also, she was tired, but fatigue, and Miss Atwell's wiry body never seemed to have made acquaintance, and the early constraint disappeared before her briskness and bustle. It was a very good meal. When it had been eaten, Miss Atwell produced, as if by magic, a quart of champagne which had been in a bucket of ice all morning. Phyllis opened it with a dexterity which made Haynes envious, and it was poured into 4 glasses, Phyllis refusing to have any. Not me, Miss A, not me, not me. I have to go out. I have to go out with my boyfriend. No cakes today. And if this thing don't agree with me, look what a pickle I'll find myself in. When the glasses were filled, Miss Atwell rose, and Haynes realized she was going to make a speech. Maisie started to laugh, and only a sharp, Maisie, I'll make you get up from this. Mrs. Rose recalled her to order. Phyllis stood with her fat face wearing a fine grin, full of interest and importance. Mrs. Rose smiled and looked brighter, but she maintained her air of abstraction. Miss Atwell waited, and when perfect silence was established, she began. She spoke with fluency and without the slight nervousness. Mr. Haynes, we is all highly gratified that you has honored us with your presence here today. We has, you hear the English people? We has all liked you from the day you come here. You sits in your room and you doesn't go out. You reads your book, you writes your paper, you plays your gramophone, you troubles nobody, and we wish you long life and prosperity. Man, I've never heard such English language. Anyway, let's continue reading. After applause, chiefly a great burst of laughter from Phyllis and loud "Hear, hear, hears" from Maisie, Haynes rose to reply. On the few occasions in his past life that he had been called upon to speak, he, having prepared carefully, had made rather a mess of things. There was that never to be forgotten occasion on which he had begun with, personally, myself, and then could go no further. Now he rose to his feet and, confident of his intellectual superiority. What is wrong with me today? Sometimes I can't pronounce some of these words. Superiority got going from the first sentence. The champagne also helped enormously. He spoke of Mrs. Rose's hard work and patience in her troubles, of Miss Atwell's staunch friendship, of Phyllis' devotion. Then he again thanked them all for their kindness, making individual references, and ended by wishing them all a happy and prosperous new year. It was up to that time the speech of his life. There was a sustained burst of applause and a chorus of "Excellent, excellent" from Miss Atwell. Ever afterwards, one of her favorite remarks was that Haynes should stand for the Legislative Council. She then got up, rummaged in a drawer, and produced a cigar. My. We knows that you asked Phyllis to buy one sometimes, so we got her to buy one of the same kind, Mr. Haynes. Haynes lit up at once. Phyllis removed some of the dishes. A pint of whiskey and some well-iced soda were placed for Haynes, and vermouth for the ladies, and they were all very much at home. "It's very hot, Mr. Haynes. I see you is perspiring. You can take off your jacket, Mr. Haynes. Push that curtain away, Maisie. Phyllis, take Mr. Haynes' jacket. You is no stranger, Mr. Haynes." "Whiskey for me, Mr. Haynes? Thank you. I likes a little whiskey." After a general conversation and 2 whiskeys and sodas, Haynes said goodbye and went over to his room, full of food and drink and vaguely conscious that all of the Christmas eating and drinking, and vaguely conscious that of all the Christmas eating and drinking. This had been the best. Maisie, who had followed him, somewhat dampened his satisfaction by saying that he had spoken too long. But he knew Maisie too well to let her think he was affected by her criticism. Jealous, Maisie? That's what you are. If you say so, Mr. Haynes. She lay back in an armchair, her hands behind her head. Mr. Haynes, she said suddenly. What is it? I want a cigarette. What will Mrs. Rose say? I wouldn't let her see. All those white ladies smoke. I don't see why I shouldn't smoke. Look in my pocket, but mind, I didn't give them to you. No, Mr. Haynes, you light it for me. Sure, said Haynes. Here you go. Here you are. I give you with a kiss. I give you with a kiss, and if he did not seek to implement them, the words at least were bold. Oh, Mr. Haynes, 1 glass of champagne and 2 glasses of whiskey? But it was more than that. Haynes was feeling happy by the unexpected fluency he had found in his tongue, and that had given him a new confidence. Hold her and kiss her, Ben had said, and now he felt that he could do what he liked with Maisie when he pleased. She too seemed aware of a subtle change in Haynes' manner. She did not seem dissatisfied and lay back puffing. With an ease which bespoke practice, Maisie in the armchair, Haynes sitting across his bed with his back on the wall. Their eyes met, and Haynes did not withdraw his as often. A film seemed to draw over Maisie's. Why are you looking at me like that, Mr. Haynes? She whispered. Why are you looking like that? Why are you looking at me like that, Mr. Haynes? She whispered. Because I want to. You are very nice to look at. You have suddenly become a great speech maker, Mr. Haynes. A sudden knock at the door startled them both. It was Miss Atwell come to borrow a book to read. Mr. Haynes, the last one was good. A little high for me, but good. I is not a person of much education, and I knows nothing about stories and so on. I used to be a great reader of novels in my day. Well, that is a long time now, and novels isn't serious books, though some of them has good morals. But I passed through the universal spelling book at school, Mr. Haynes, and when you pass through that, you know something. You can take it from me, and I can tell you, Mr. Haynes, it was a real good book. And no mistake. A1 and no mistake. High class. But how do men think of these things, Mr. Haynes? I mean, education. That's what it is. Education. If I had a child, I would sacrifice anything to give him education. Thanks very much, Mr. Haynes. I'll take care of this one. She had barely disappeared before Maisie's lip curled into a rather bitter sneer. But listen to the withered old monkey. If she had a child. Well, my God, if she make a child. God come. Quiet, please, Maisie, warned Haynes. But Miss Atwell must have heard. Usually she did not carry news on Maisie, and if not on the side of quiet, was always on the side of peace. But she was the only person who could have told Mrs. Rose that Maisie was smoking a cigarette. And even if she mentioned it, she could hardly have she could hardly have foreseen the consequences. Mrs. Rose suddenly appeared at the door and caught Maisie in the very act of emitting smoke from her lips, head thrown back, face to the ceiling and under lip extended. She walked in quickly. "Mr. Haynes, you must excuse me. I have to disrespect you today. So, is that you coming to in, young lady? You're smoking." Sorry, let me read this back again. "Mr. Haynes, you must excuse me. I have to disrespect you today." She turned to Maisie. "So, is that you coming to? In, young lady? You're smoking? Not in my house." And she boxed Maisie right and left about the face until, to save herself, Maisie ran from the room. My God, people. Tory come to bump. Haynes had no time to say a word, even if he had thought of something to say. Mrs. Rose had been so expeditious. Then he heard Maisie's voice outside raised. "You old advantage taker! But I am not going to take this so. By Christ, I'm not going to take it so." The incident ruined the day. Maisie had undoubtedly been hardly treated. Although Mrs. Rose had never actually caught her, she knew that Maisie smoked, and Maisie was not smoking in her house. The room was Haynes' room. As Maisie said, it was a piece of advantage taking. Maisie complained to Haynes that he ought not to allow Mrs. Rose to treat his room as if it were her own house. But when Mrs. Rose later apologized profusely, Haynes brushed her apologies away. He was one of them now, sharer of joys and troubles. He knew it and not so much welcomed it as it took it for granted. Sorry, let me read this back again. He was one of them now, sharer of joys and troubles. He knew it and not so much welcomed it as took it for granted. It was a quarrel between both his good friends that worried him. And what reason was there for it? Maisie answered at once. Why she do that? Why? Because her heart hurting over that Mr. Ben spending Christmas with the nurse instead of her? But that is no reason why she must beat me as if I am pudding. If she want to beat somebody, let her go down to town and beat the nurse. I didn't steal her, man. Ben. That man is an evil spirit haunting this house. But I am not going to take this so. I am not going to take it so. I am not her beating stick. She spoke loudly so that Mrs. Rose could not fail to hear. You're not going to take it? Do what you like, said Mrs. Rose. And two, besides, don't give me too much of your cheeks out there. What can you do? You'll see. Look here, said Mrs. Rose, and came to the door. But Miss Atwell told her not to bother. Haynes was troubled not only by the incident, but by a certain open defiance in Maisie's attitude, of which he was now fully aware for the first time. He knew Mrs. Rose's temper, and he now was beginning to be aware of Maisie's. He felt that he had to be on the alert to prevent trouble. He realized that whatever he said would carry weight with them. And with this realization came a sense of responsibility and increasing confidence. Miss Atwell, too, was his abject slave and admired his appearance, his clothes, his speech, and everything about him, with a personal pleasure and a desire to please. that overbore embarrassment. How these women centered round a man. "It's good to be a man," said Haynes to himself, and girded himself for the task of showing both Maisie and himself what a man he was. Oh well. Well. So that is the end of chapter 21. So when we get back here again, folks, we will read chapter 22 and we will see what Haynes means when he says, what he means to show Maisie that he's what a man he was, right? So we will see what he means when he wants to show Maisie what a man he is. So that's the end of chapter 21. So we will pause there for today. So as usual, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time just to be on my page and listening to my stories. Thank you so much. So I hope you folks will have a productive week ahead of you. I know tomorrow is holiday, so guys, be careful on the road. Be careful. Live, love, laugh, respect each other, and just be nice to each other. So tomorrow is Independence holiday. Well, I don't even know what to say now. I keep my views personal when it comes to these things, Some people would say, what does independence mean to them? But, I think we have a long way to go as a country. We have a long way to go. There are a lot of things that we need to get right. So I can't say that we have not made improvement in certain things, but we have a long way to go in order for us to say that we are fully independent. But anyway, you all enjoy your holiday tomorrow. Please make it productive and be safe. Be safe on the road. Holidays, people always tend to get crazy with the driving and drinking and all sort of stuff. So whatever you do, guys, please be careful. Also remember to like, subscribe and share my page. Like, subscribe and share. Still waiting on you to leave a comment about the books that you think I've read, the book that you think I've read, and the book that I'm reading now. So waiting to hear your comment. And I would just love to hear from you all. Alright, so take care and I'll be back again. Bye.